We're Buntport Theater Company, and you're watching In Focus.
Welcome to In Focus with Eden Lane.
We begin our 4th season with a visit to the Buntport Theater Company. And their 11th season begins with My Hideous Progeny, their latest work based on the life of Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. They'll also tell us about their process that brought them this success for 11 seasons. It's been so long since we've had a real visit in your space at Buntport Theater Company. Thanks for letting me come in the middle of your tech week for your season opener.
For Holy you, smokes, anything.
Thank you for coming.
Well, I keep seeing you guys at other events, Colorado New Place Summit, the Henrys, of course. You have 8 Henrys now?
We do.
What does that feel like as a company to have that kind of recognition pouring over you all the time like this?
It's so nice. It's nice to be part of the community. I think it's an awesome community that we have here in Denver, and to be recognized is incredible.
It's a little bit overwhelming.
Yes.
And always totally surprising. Yeah. I mean, that's.
I often don't believe actors when they say they're surprised. But I believe you were surprised this year when you won because of your stylist's choice in clothing during your category.
I was genuinely not expecting to have to walk back out on stage. I mean, just the people that I was up against, I was like, there's no way. I'm going to relax. I've got my dumb cat outfit on, and I don't have to do anything. So I was genuinely
Is there an impact to your ability to grow your audience when you receive those kinds of awards, or is it just belonging to the theater community in Colorado?
No, I think it has an audience impact. I mean, any kind of that, the way that we run our company is sort of word of mouth, and so any recognition that we get through the press or other venues, the Theater Guild, it gets people here, which is good, which is what we want.
Absolutely, because you don't do this work in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Well,
hopefully.
maybe with this set, I don't know. It could be the
That's
inside of a
our
vacuum.
next show. Just in a vacuum. There'll be no one here.
Now, the last time we actually got to sit down in your space was for a drama, which is not what you're known for. And this season, you're opening with
a drama.
What's the name of it?
My Hideous Progeny.
I beg your pardon?
My Hideous Progeny.
Which is a quotation from Mary Shelley.
Yes.
Mary Shelley of Frankenstein fame.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How did you choose this material to start with? Because you write, it's not a play that you found somewhere. In case viewers don't remember or haven't visited you as a company write all of your own material, and you all direct each other, and you all play. And so how did you select Mary Shelley?
I think last season, because we were doing all of our remounts, we had an opportunity to do a lot of reading and searching, and Mary Shelley was something that had piqued one of our interest. And so I think it was me and Aaron took it to the next level and was like, okay, let me actually hone in on what we like about her, what we like about any of this. And so it's just like picking something out of a fishbowl, and you're like, oh, all right, let's look into this, and then something will develop or it won't.
That's kind of how you described how you chose Indiana, which was my last visit to your company. Somebody saw the book and you wanted to adapt it. Is that how you typically do it? Whatever one of you is inspired by, you bring to the group?
Yeah. We pitch shows to each other. Like, we actually sort of, as homework, go home, come up with something. Next Tuesday, we have to pitch. And so you come in and you say, this is what it's about. This is what the set looks like. And some are more formed than others. And then we start riffing off of those,
Or everyone sits there like this after you've pitched your great idea.
That happens a lot.
Or claps sarcastically.
Yeah, we do that a lot.
Because this is a safe space.
It's a safe space.
It's very safe. It's very safe.
Yeah, a really good space to come in and, bare your emotions.
Yes. Bare your soul. Bare your soul day.
That doesn't sound like very much fun. So there's no tally of, okay, we have 12 shows this season, so we each get to have one. It's you have to go through a pitch process to get to a group.
Yeah. And, over the course of 10 years, this is now our 11th season, there's ideas that have kind of been on the table that, for whatever reason, we didn't figure out at the time. And Mary Shelley's been mentioned before.
Yeah.
Just because, we work with writers relatively often, and working with a female writer is something that we haven't really done before. And so I think that was something that made her interesting as well.
When you say working with a female writer, you mean as the inspiration?
Her work, yeah.
As subject matter, yeah.
You have 3 female writers
Yes,
in your
that's
group,
true.
which is something that we did talk about at the Henrys. One of your reactions to winning was that you get to play rich female characters that aren't readily available because you all write your own. Tell me about what that process is of writing. Does after I come to the meeting and I pitch and we all agree, yes, we're going to do Erin's idea, does Erin have to go then write it, or do you write it
First,
together?
I lord it over everyone that it was my idea that I picked.
Yeah.
So we have a
Rubs it
few
in.
days where I'm like, it was my idea, but it was my idea. We remember it was my idea.
Well, yeah, we usually start and
Do you all do that, by the way? Do you
Yeah,
all?
oh,
yeah, we keep track
Yeah.
for sure.
And then when enough time goes by and you can't remember whose idea it was, then you start saying, at that point, like in a few months, I can be like, oh, that was my idea.
Yeah.
Don't you remember at the cocktail party? About,
Yeah, I said, isn't Mary Shelley great?
No.
Don't you just love Mary Shelley?
Or, I was watching on HBO last night, right?
Yeah.
So who writes it? Does the person who pitched it write it? Do you
No,
work
we
collaboratively?
all usually at that point we come up with something we're going to write about, and then everybody goes their own way, and we start churning ideas together. Some of them inspire scenes, some of them get drastically cut or completely cut, but a lot of it is just like, let's dive in, see what comes out, and then out of that we get to pick out the nuggets that, like, oh, this is interesting what you wrote about, or this is maybe not the subject line we want to go down, or so from there it starts to create a life of its own, I think.
Becoming somewhat familiar with your work now, and the relationship you all display together, it seems as though even if something you've come to the group with that you've written doesn't get used, it's informative of what ultimately comes about. Is that a fair assessment of how
Yeah,
you work?
there's a lot of research that's done before the writing even starts. After the pitch meeting, we all go off and try and learn about the subject or the piece that's being adapted or whatever it is, so that you can come back with more depth than just saying, oh, Mary Shelley, she wrote that one story. So you have a basis of
So now you all
her
know that
life.
she's written travelogues and
Yes,
right?
and read lots of her letters, and so you have her voice in mind while writing, and then come to a different place than just reading the single story.
You also get to figure out where you want to veer off from, because it's not, of course, we've made up an enormous amount of information in this play, or just tweaked everything the way that we make, that works for us. We'll turn the timeline on its head. That didn't really happen with that guy, but it's convenient.
It serves the narrative.
Yes.
And that's what happens. It's a paring down. Normally, after everyone comes back together, we have enough text that we start to, just carve it down into what becomes the narrative. And you're right. There are things that someone else writes that, though it doesn't get in the show, some piece of that will inform the character, or it ends up being important backstory, and you could use that later when you're an actor to build the character.
Yeah, were we the kind of actors to have backstories or, put work into our acting, we would use that.
If I could hear anything else in my head besides,
Yeah.
I would, I could tell you where my character went to breakfast that day, but otherwise, nothing.
So after 10 seasons, this being your 11th, is this how you began this process, or has it grown to this sort of thing?
We've gotten better at it. We shake it up sometimes, but it's sort of been, I think the writing process has been honed the most. We used to be a little more crazy, I think, with the way that we did it, but now...
More than you are now?
Well, not like content-wise, but I think we're much better now at, there's a formula where it's like the draft gets edited, we do another draft, we edit that, and we really schedule it out so that we have, several drafts done before there's something that we're happy with, and that has come through just time and knowing
After
the
10
time that it
years,
takes.
you know what someone's going to write. And we all, I think, are maybe getting better at hearing the other writers' voices, you know, and maybe just making them a little bit more seamless in transition to put them together, knowing how we write.
And we have a common language.
Yeah.
So we can reference
That's
our
what I mean.
own shows really quickly. It's like, oh, the tone of this is not blah, it is blah. You know, this is more Kafka on Ice, not Titus Andronicus, and everyone knows right away what that means. You know.
And so
that
does your
helps.
audience, your devoted audience.
Yeah.
They know that lexicon that you've created as well. Over 10 years, the audience that you have has become, I don't want to use the word rabid, but let's. they're vehement supporters of your company. When you're writing, do you think about the audience and what they've experienced before in your work as you're writing, or do you throw that all out and start with a clean slate each time?
It's kind of a clean slate, although doing remounts all of last year brought some things to the surface for us that maybe we hadn't even realized, where we were like
Like
wow,
what?
we have made large animals come to life more times than we thought we would.
I calculated.
There's themes. You know,
20% of the shows we have written have giant, full
Talking.
body talking animals, and I think that's an obscene number. I was like, clearly we're obsessed. We just certain themes.
I
keep
wear a
popping
mustache
up.
in almost every show.
Mustaches appear more often than large animals. I mean, it's sort of a strange.
Mustaches appear so often that you have worn them when you're presenting at an award show.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You can't get away from them.
No, they're comfortable.
We're obsessed with them. We're obsessed. It's a weird thing, but I think that we do.
So large human-like animals
talking
and
animals
facial hair.
and facial
facial
hair.
hair.
And that's all you need to make a Buntport show.
Buntport.
That's it. That's the secret.
Yeah.
So how can you tell if a talking animal has facial hair
Yeah.
or if that's just their fur?
Yeah.
That's complicated.
You're blowing us up.
complicated.
We,
That's
we
like-
keep those things separate.
That's too meta. I'm
Yeah.
not really sure. How you combine the two.
Yeah.
As you're writing material, do you write for yourself as an actor, or do you write for each? How do you know who's going to play a part, or do you not know that when you begin?
We don't know.
The most interesting day is casting.
Do you make each other audition?
Sometimes.
For fun. For fun we do.
I mean, if you have to pitch, why not
Yeah.
Well,
put
this
each
is-
other through that?
It's a very strange thing about our process because we are writing for ourselves and we know that, and we could write for performers, and we never have. And so now it's just how we do it. We just write for the amount of actors, and then we sit down and figure out who's going to play the part. And I don't really know why we do it that way, other than that's how we've always done it.
Yeah, I don't know why either. Sometimes there are certain things that dictate, like somebody can't, like often when it's mentioned that there's a short character, it's obvious I'm not the one that's going to play.
Unless you're going to wear knee pads and
Yeah, and do a little dwarf
Dwarf
on stage.
Dwarf on
yeah.
theater.
And it's written for the gender breakdown that we have. But then sometimes there's still discussions of who.
Sometimes
Well, we've
not.
seen you
Yeah.
perform out of gender.
Yes.
Yes.
We've seen that. So you can write for more women than you have, or
Yes.
more men than you have.
Yeah.
You kind of go through a casting process. So how did that work for this play? Who was the lead as the writer, and how did you figure out who was going to play Mary Shelley, and who else appears in this piece?
I think some of it for Mary Shelley, knowing that she was in a bathtub the whole time. I think a lot of us might have assumed that Erin was going to be that just because she has an endurance for things like that. For Jug Rabbit Stew, she was
For
hanging
sure, I
in a
wasn't gonna
chair
do
for
it.
and Hannah tends to not want to be that uncomfortable, but it was never really decided that way. But
I thought you
by
were going to say
default.
Erin had a proclivity for nudity on stage.
Yeah.
does.
yeah,
She
that's
does.
it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nope.
That's it.
Talking animals, mustaches, and
Our new
nudity.
thing is nudity.
If Mary Shelley was nude in the ice bath, no one would have played her. I think.
We had the discussion.
I might have.
So why is Mary Shelley in the tub the whole time? Can you tell us without?
I think we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she lost several children in her life, but we've decided to pick a biographical moment where the story is that she miscarried, and to save her, she was hemorrhaging. Percy, her husband, put her in a cold bath, ice bath, to stop the bleeding. And so that's a moment that we've taken out and kind of blown out, and so she exists in this bath the whole time, but the timeline moves around to different parts of her life as she would dream it, or you're not quite sure what is happening in her mind and what is happening.
And the sort of visual concept tie-in is that a lot of Frankenstein takes place in the ice. It opens and closes in the North Pole, and there's a whole middle swath that takes place in the ice and snow. And so there's sort of a giant ice bath, as it were, with a small ice bath in it, and so that sort of worked as a conceptual tie-in.
So your set, as well as how we meet Mary Shelley, is very high concept.
Yes. Yeah. It's this very, sleek, sort of modern white snowscape, and then we're all in period clothes, sort of heavy, dark period clothes, and there's this sort of strange
Juxtaposition.
Sure.
When you're making these kinds of choices, is it driven solely by the material, or is it sometimes driven by the economics of being able to present the story? What really is the stronger driver?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Part of, we like to come up with the set design at the same time as the topic of the show, because it just feels stronger for us that they've sort of always been melded together, and now this, in our 11th season, it's easy for us to evaluate pretty quickly what we're capable of and what we can afford.
So that's part of it. It's the concepts that's serving the material, but it's also what can you reasonably put together so that it fits in with your capabilities. Is there a style that you would describe your productions? Is there any way that you would describe it that's common to most of your productions?
In the past, we've used a term saying transformational, in that, not in a sort of highfalutin way, but in a lot of our sets actually transform. I think earlier on, it was definitely more, it happened more often, but we sometimes say that, but I think we often do a lot with a little. And I think we know that going in. We know what we have. We know what our theater is and what our capabilities are, and so I think we write shows to that. We don't write shows that need a helicopter to come down.
We do sometimes, but then they're small ones.
Yes.
Little radio control.
If it's gonna rain, we're gonna make it rain with a hose in a different way. So
I don't know if this is
if something's going to burn up, like you did with Indiana. You did it with projection.
Yeah, with video. Yeah, and I don't know the right way of describing it, but I think an idea that comes up regularly is sort of making magic out of the mundane, trying to take something very low tech and make it still feel special,
I think that's a good way to describe it. From what I've seen from your work, there is this essence that, while it's hard to find a word to label Buntport Theater's look and style, there is this through line that tells me I'm in for a different kind of theatrical experience when I come here, whether it's visual or the point of view, that sort of thing. Was that a conscious decision, or did that grow, is that how you started 10 years ago, or did that develop over the decade before we?
Well, we met in college, and I would say that some of the productions that we worked on in school had a similar kind of vibe in terms of the approach. And so I think that definitely...
you all went to the same college?
Yeah.
What college was that?
Colorado College down in Colorado Springs.
Wow.
Yeah. Different, there's a spread of years, but and some of us are older, and some of us are younger.
Can you tell which?
Like if you had to go
Some
1, 2,
are
3, 4.
much older.
Some are
really
old.
Okay.
I don't know if I mentioned this before we started, but we're not going to discuss age today.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much.
So since that sort of grew organically out of that educational experience, is that something that you think is moving somewhere? I mean, do you have a direction where you're taking the artistic style of Buntport Theater, or is it just something that is? Is there a place that you're trying to get
Well,
to?
I mean, something I enjoy about working at Buntport is that we are always trying new styles, it seems to me. You know, while we have a voice that is our own that I think pervades through most of our shows, what's exciting to me is like, we haven't tried this kind of dancey piece. Let's try that, you know, and that keeps it interesting for us. We're not always, you know, doing the same narrative.
I think that it also speaks to what you were asking before about, you know, are we thinking of our audience? What are we thinking about when we pick? And I think a lot of times when we're choosing subject matters, despite the fact that the mustache always comes back up again and the big animal, we're trying to pick things that feel different to us and feel like an interesting challenge. But also invariably during the course of rehearsals, we will talk about what would this be like for someone who's never seen a Buntport show? What would this be like for somebody who really knows our work well? And sort of all of that stuff comes into.
Well, that keeps you from being so inside that you actually can have your audience grow and change.
But I will say though, on the other side, that one of the great things about our audience base is that they are open, and I feel like an artist who can feel like it's material driven, it's a nice feeling, and I feel we're definitely sided that way because of our brave audience. They haven't, you know, they haven't abandoned
I love that
us.
you called your audience brave. I love that when artists have that kind of respect for their audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the work we do, it takes that. I mean, they've been through, like you were saying, it's maybe a slightly different theatrical experience than what you're conditioned to or what you've seen the most of, and so you've got to let loose a little bit, you know, to appreciate it, I think.
Well, we know this is the opening of your 11th season. How exciting is that?
It's really exciting.
What is coming for the rest of your 11th season? What can you share with us about what we can look forward to?
We know one other show, which is Kafka on Ice, which we're
This
doing.
will be the third time you're
Yeah,
doing Kafka
when
on
we
Ice.
did it last season, it
The nominated and awarded.
Yeah,
production.
it did really well,
Uh-huh.
and so there were still a lot of people who were interested who weren't able to see it, and so we decided, we'll do it. It's a short run, it's 2 weeks, but we're gonna do that in December.
Will you have the same Kafka?
So, yeah,
Josh Hartwell.
Hartwell.
Returning, reprising his
awesome.
role.
Yeah. And then we'll do 2 yet to be conceived of shows in the spring.
It's possible that one of them will have to do with Tommy Lee Jones,
That's true.
but we
Don't-
still have to work
Don't tell him that.
out some kinks.
And you have a lot of other programming that occurs all the time. You still have Trunks?
Trunks is going on. That's runs basically the school year. It hasn't quite started yet, but every other Saturday throughout the school
And
year.
Buntport Versus.
Yeah, the third Tuesdays. So we have Buntport versus.
Who's the next Buntport Versus?
Against. When this airs, it will have just happened, which would be Buntport versus Crafters.
So the next one after this airs would be
Stand-up
Buntport
comedians.
versus stand-up comedians.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be rough. And then the other thing.
I have to say, I don't think the stand-up comedians have any idea what they're in for.
That might be true.
Yeah.
That might be true.
The other third Tuesday programs that we're doing are, excuse me, that we rotate with Buntport Versus as well, is a new one which is called Syndicated Buntport, where the audience comes and we'll do something from our past. So it might be from, we have 100 episodes of sitcoms that we did for 8 years, and so it might be one of those, or some sort of random sketch that we did a long time ago, or a full production.
Or maybe even trying out some new things?
Could be, yeah.
Little trial, kind of?
Yeah, and then the third program. What's the third
The
program?
Great
It's the Great Debate. And that's we've been doing that for a couple years, and that's
The great debate as we're gearing up to an election year, is that the kind of thing that you debate?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we debate
important
the
topics.
important issue. Actually, I would say the issues we debate could be on the level that presidential debates get into. You know, it doesn't really get at the heart of the matter.
So what was the last one?
The last one.
Area 51 versus
Studio
Studio 54.
And the October third Tuesday is the great debate, and it will be the Hindenburg or the Titanic.
We've done Bacon versus Kevin Bacon, wizards versus vampires. Super important stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, get into the heart
Yeah.
of
It's a
the matter.
really
What everybody's
rich,
wondering.
Theater with the RE kind of work
Oh,
being
yeah.
done
Yeah.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the good
Dress
thing about
up nicely and have a nice fancy dinner.
Speaking of
before
dressing
you
up
come.
nicely, I see these over here. Are these coming up in a Buntport production this season?
God, I don't
Here's
know.
to hoping.
This with facial hair and life-size
Yeah.
Put a
talking
mustache on that
animals?
shoe.
Put a
and
mustache on that
feathers,
shoe.
we're done.
Tommy Lee Jones and an otter go to a shoe store. That's gonna be
Try
our,
on mustaches.
that'll be our
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who has the mustache?
the
otter.
otter.
They
That was gonna
all
be the mix.
They all
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Well, that's what it's like at Buntport. And if you want to come and see their current production opening for their 11th season, My
Hideous Progeny.
just visit their webpage and make sure you get a ticket right away. There aren't that many seats in here, and you don't want to miss your chance to see Buntport's opening of their 11th season.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's all for this edition. Remember to join us on Facebook and Twitter. With all that Colorado has to offer, we're here to help you keep it in focus. Thanks for watching. Good night.